Hi guys, welcome to Star Wars Timeline. My name is Ben and I'm continuing to review the Droids show. Now, a couple of weeks back, I didn't realize that I missed one of the episodes, right? So when I went to episode 7, The Pirates of Tarunga, I realized that King Julpa is already a king. That was just a little bit jarring to me, and I was like, hold on a second, he was a prince in one episode, now he is a king. Turns out I missed one of the episodes. So what I'm doing today is I'm going back, I rewatched this episode, so I'm gonna plug this in and it completes the picture for the show for me so far. So let's jump into it. We're gonna talk about episode 6, The New King. Quick warning alert, guys. Before we start talking about this, please be warned that this will be a full-on spoiler review. If you really care about the story and the character, stuff like this, I advise you go and check it out for yourselves first, and then you could come over and see my review and, kind of give me your 2 cents on what you think my impression of this episode. Anyway, let's jump into it. I will be describing this story and my impression of it as I go along. We begin the episode in space, right? We meet once again with our hero John. We see the droids, and they're transporting Prince Julpa to be crowned on his planet Tamuzan. And he's being transported by this pilot who calls himself Old Iron Pants, which is kind of a weird name, right? And John tries to make some light conversation with him. Turns out the pilot takes off their helmet, and it turns out to be Jessica. And if you guys have looked at my previous episode reviews, she became like one of the coolest, most interesting characters to me, and I was really happy to see her in this episode because I felt like there wasn't enough of her. I'm like, hey guys, if there's future episodes there, I definitely want to see Jessica. And boom, here she comes out of nowhere, which was a pleasant surprise to me. We also get a private hologram from R2-D2 about Uncle Gundy, saying his last goodbye to John. And of course, it was an overture to episode 6 when we see R2-D2 do the same thing and relay the hologram of Luke Skywalker to Jabba the Hutt in his palace when he presents the true droids as a gift. So I thought it was a really interesting play from the live-action Star Wars to the show, kind of like connect those two little details and show how, similarities of style. Later in this episode, we see King Julpa also on the ship, and he's basically reveals to us his opponent, basically the bad guy for this episode, this evil Vesire Zatek Cha. And the moment that they said the word Vizier, I kind of imagined that this planet of Tamuzan will be something akin to like a Middle Eastern sort of themed planet, which of course we're going to jump into and discuss later in this review. But anyway, as our friends are traveling to the planet, they're being attacked. On one hand, we have the pirates, right? We have Kylo Ren, who wants the scepter because, he's been hired by this evil vizier. On the other hand, there's another party, and no one but IG-88, the assassin droid, comes out and he starts attacking our group as well. Obviously, we see him in the Empire Strikes Back for the first time. Obviously, we see him in the Mandalorian show. And I was surprised to see him here as well, because like many fans, I'm watching this droid show for the first time. Like, oh, all right, so we had Boba Fett, now we have IG-88. Once again, it's George Lucas and the creators behind this show are trying to tie in all of these elements to show that there's this larger universe, right, of events and stories happening in the Star Wars lore. So there's attack going on. Our friends are managed to escape, but of course they have to abandon their ship. They get into this escape, like smaller flight, and Jessica's ship is destroyed. She's also wounded in the attack. She has some cracked ribs. And of course, in the spaceport, immediately, Prince Julpa says, hey, like, take care of her. We need to help her. She needs to go to the hospital. And it was cool how when the ship is landing, C-3PO uses his language skills to kind of trick the escort, right? Because the planetary escort immediately asks, hey, who are you guys? Why are you landing on this planet? And the party is able to divert their attention thanks to C-3PO. So he comes through for the friends. And I always enjoy that in this show, we meet a group of heroes, but C-3PO and R2-D2 are never left on the side. They're never just there. They always participate in the episode. They always help out. And this is what C-3PO does in this particular instance. So later on, we're in this palace or this little room of Prince Julpa where he lays down the plans, what they got to do to secure his crown. Basically, they got to go through this ritual of coronation, and what they have to do is deliver the royal scepter in his hands to the keeper in the tower. They have to do it by the dawn of the next day, and the person who delivers the scepter will be crowned as a king. So it's pretty much like as much of a ritual as it is a test of courage and who is able to do this, accomplish the task first. And he explains that there is a secret entrance to Zatek Cha's fortress, that's the evil vizier. And as he's explaining the plans to John and, of course, the audience who's watching the episode, we understand that there is this spy by the window. They drop down and they escape. And obviously, John is the one who charges after the spies. He tries to catch them. And R2-D2 and C-3PO go after him. They also want to help out. In the meantime, the Scepter, King Julpa, and also Jessica are all being captured, right? We see IG-88, the assassin droid, grab the Scepter. He disarms and disables the Prince Julpa, and they're being delivered to the evil vizier's palace. And here is where we meet Zatek Cha. We early see a snippet of him in this hologram in the beginning of the episode, but we don't get the idea of what he really looks like. Here we finally take a look at him. And my suspicions were proved right. This is basically a Middle Eastern themed kind of planet, and the Vizier reminded me immediately of the Vizier Jafar from the original Aladdin animated film by Disney. I was like, oh, okay, I see the comparison there. But not only there, the rest of the episode has very big Dungeons and Dragons vibes, and I will explain obviously. Obviously, there's a dungeon there, but also thematically and visually. You know, Dungeons and Dragons has been known for introducing different elements from like Asian art to medieval European art. And of course, heavy themes of like the art of Islam or like the Arabic culture, Middle Eastern cultures and stuff like this. And this is what this evil vizier reminded me of because, you know, I have Middle Eastern roots myself. So it was kind of like close and dear to my heart. I'm like, oh, that's cool. They're doing something different here, different vibe to this episode, which I really enjoyed. And like I mentioned before, this episode has a very heavy cloak and dagger type of storytelling, which is very native to Dungeons and Dragons intellectual property. And we see John and the droids descend into these dungeons, right? And they're full of traps. There is like a trap floor, there's a lava river, there's a stone, obviously, that falls on top of our friends, which is a clear overture to Indiana Jones movies. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. They're playing on all these themes of popular 80s adventure films and Dungeons and Dragons, which obviously was huge in the 80s. And also in these dungeons, the evil vizier Zatek Cha unleashes his beast, right? It's called Durkee, and this almost dinosaur-like creature jumps out like a lizard, like huge towering thing. At first, for some reason, I thought it was going to be a Rancor because, once again, a repetition of themes from episode 6. But gladly, they actually designed a brand new creature from scratch, and I think it really works for this episode. And this time around, early in the episode, we saw C-3PO's vocabulary and skills with languages help out the friends. Here, it's R2-D2. And what he does is he recognizes that this creature is being maddened and like thrown into this frenzy by this insect species called Keeks. And he's able to take it out from the creature's tail and pacify it. And I really enjoyed the fact that we learned this creature, unlike the Rancor, is really benevolent. And it was acting this like crazy sorts of ways because it's being infected by this little parasite or the pest. And I also thought it was a cool teachable moment for kids who the show is designed for, which it tells them like, look, not all creatures are evil or bad just because they look big, right? Obviously, kids have infatuation with dinosaurs, and there's plenty of big dinosaurs who, unlike the T-Rex, are completely omnivores, right? They only eat plants and they don't eat, meat or don't consume other creatures. And that's what this beast is here. And it was really nice. It became very docile. It like hugs R2-D2. I thought it was like a very endearing moment there. Anyway, now we're in the last leg of our adventure where all of the friends, first of all, John and the droids, they obviously escaped the dungeons after all the traps. And the friends are jumping on these gliders for the final leg of this journey. They have to deliver the scepter. And the chase begins. We have the bad guys flying around. We have the good guys flying around. and the scepter is being juggled from party to party, from friends to the villains to the droids, back and forth, until, of course, it ends up in R2-D2 and C-3PO's hands, but they're disguised as Zatek Cha's henchmen, right? And they're the ones who are able to secure it, pass it on to Prince Julpa, and he's the one who delivers it to the Watcher of the Tower. Surprisingly, for the rest of this episode, IG-88 is nowhere to be found. I'm like, is he going to show up at the end? I still try to kind of steal the scepter. What's going on? He just disappears. I don't know if we're going to see him in other episodes in the show, but to me, there was a little mystery. It was like, I was confused. I'm like, okay, why introduce him then? He was there just for a few seconds and he doesn't, participate in the action for the rest of the episode. Anyway, we see King Julpa is crowned. John is named as advisor to the court, to King Julpa. But once again, they reinforce their friendship to one another. And that's where their loyalties lie. And that's why King Julpa now will be an admirable ruler, because he doesn't subjugate his people. He doesn't tell them, oh, now you're my subordinates, I'm the king, and you have to listen to what I say. So what really comes off surprising in the positive way to me in the show is that none of the episodes are preachy. They're clearly teaching something to the kids and say, like, hey, you need to distinguish who your friends and villains are. Sometimes people are not what they seem, what they look like. Sometimes a creature that looks very menacing and big could be very warm, kind-hearted, and you need to kind of really pay a close mind and pay attention to figure out who's a good guy and who is not. But the show doesn't do it in the preachy way. I keep bringing back one other show from my childhood, The He-Man, where by the end of each episode, there's very on the nose, and kids, you shouldn't do this. He-Man or some other cast member of the show literally preaches to the choir, and he tells the kids exactly what they should learn from this, the lesson learned from the episode. This show doesn't do it, and I really think it works well for it. All in all, I enjoyed this episode. Honestly, in the beginning, I wasn't vibing with this episode. I was like, oh, okay, it's probably going to be more of a simple and quieter episode where it's just King Julpa being crowned, and it's going to be more of a political intrigue. But it ended up being much more exciting. It became like this cloak and dagger, Dungeons and Dragons type of experience, and I really enjoyed the dungeons part of it, all the traps that they have to escape and all the things happening there. So I really enjoyed this episode, and finally I've caught up. This was one missing episode that I skipped on, and I'm glad that I was able to find it on time and actually fix my YouTube playlist and show you guys that, hey, I gotta go back and watch this episode. Anyway, I'll push on watching this show. I can't wait to complete it so I can go to the Ewok show, because I'm hearing from a lot of fans like, hey, Ben, if you're enjoying the Droids show, you will definitely like the Ewok show. I'm from that generation. I'm from the 80s. I grew up on DuckTales, and all of these Tailspin, all these cool Disney animated series. So I'm looking forward to the Ewoks as well. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Please let me know in the comments below what you thought of this particular episode, and did you get those Dungeons and Dragons vibes that I got from it? Or maybe it's just me. And I'll see you guys next week.